Welcome back, everybody. This is Startup Brothers Episode 3. I'm Trace Cohen. This is my startup brother, Maxwell Cohen. And we have so much to cover today in terms of what's going on. But why should you care? I'm an investor. I've been in the tech world for almost 14 years now in high tech. Some people like the hat, so I brought it back. And Max is on the founder side.
Yes, I am still the founder and the CEO of Peel Away Labs. We've been filming this for a few weeks now, and I've seen some of my friends give up. I've seen some people run out, and then I just seen it all. So I invented multi-layered peel away disposable bed sheets, featured on Shark Tank back in 2015, and we're going to talk about today's environment and running a business.
Yeah. And so, actually, about today's environment, as I mentioned in the last two, there's a website called layoffs.fyi, which kind of sounds depressing, but it's just basically like they had back in the day, F'd company, where it was basically what's going on in the industry. And so, you know what? Layoffs sometimes are natural when companies in a good environment, which we had really for the last 10 years, but specifically for the last 2 years where it went bonkers. If you laid off, something was wrong. So everyone just
Yeah.
kept hiring. You couldn't really fire people depending on what state and jurisdiction. It's hard to. And so there are a lot of companies that now either are overfunded, overvalued, and because in the last 6 months, investors changed their last 5 years of thinking growth at all costs, funding isn't as easily readily available. So what do we care about now? Back to basics, unit
Yep.
economics, EBITDA, cash flow, net positive, all these words that we're dusting off. And you know what? It worked up until now. And so I can't fault anybody for it. It just was the world we lived in, and things change always, right? You always hear those old sayings, or you watch the movies, times they are changing. Well, that's definitely what's happening. And so I'm just looking at this, and certain companies laid off 8%, 25%, and
Just saw
10%,
Tesla.
100%. Right. So Tesla, Elon, everyone is always trying to figure out one, what he's doing, but two, he said everyone has to go back to the office. So companies are laying off proactively to try and get ahead of the curve. They know something that we don't, which I have to ask Max about after. But Elon was like, great, let's try a different spin. You have to come back to the office.
Yeah.
And so, how many people actually want to do that? So, he's assuming a lot of people will resign, right? It's the other side. Instead of me firing you, you kind of
You fire
fire
yourself.
yourself. It's an interesting spin. So, he's Elon. He can kind of do more or less whatever he wants. And I'm definitely a fanboy, but I'm iffy on certain things. And then the other side of the coin is Coinbase.
Yeah.
They just announced that not only are they slowing down hiring, which they announced a few weeks ago, but they're actually rescinding offers. So I don't know who runs their PR, who thought that was a good idea, but literally signed offers of people who haven't started yet. So that's just another issue. And you know what? They know things that we don't.
I've heard even
Whether or
worse,
not the
Trace.
CEO was paid $30 million this year. He owns $100 million house, and the
Oh,
company used to
yeah.
be worth $100 billion. He sees internally all these numbers and really has to deal with the fact that the company's changing. We're in a bear market, especially in crypto, with a lot of these
Oh my.
questionable tokens about their utility. And so if he has to go that ham in terms of the ability to hire people to rescind offers, look, it's going to get bad. And so not only are there layoffs, there's less funding available, and it's just something that we constantly have to deal with in our tech industry. But it's not all doom and gloom because these are overvalued, highly funded tech companies,
Yeah.
which, you know what, last year and the year before, it worked. And it wasn't really too much of an issue up until now. Expectations have changed, and we're just dealing with the ramifications. So outside of our little tech bubble, it's not that bad. So yes, Microsoft announced that they had to revise their kind of earnings a little bit just because of some FX international money trading.
Yep.
And so if you're a good company, you're well run, you have economics, and you actually were profitable because you weren't in this tech world, then this is just a small subset. Everyone thinks tech, it gets the headlines, it's the cool new shiny object, but it's really not the biggest issue. And a lot of companies will weather through this. So, yes, there's a few dozen up to 100 plus who are going to continue to lay off as they can. They're all going back there now. We're talking to some of our companies and investments about it, how to shore up their capital. We have a bunch of them kind of closing, fortunately, bridge rounds so that they have cash is king right now, always kind of has been to some extent. And it's just going to be who can weather through the storm. Everyone always said now is the best time to start a company, invest in companies. Well, I don't think most of those people have been through downturns and recessions. And if they have, they either got lucky or they actually kind of knew what they were doing. And we're going to find out very shortly how that works.
Yeah, as
And so,
millennials, we have to take this time to learn. Our
oh,
parents and
yeah,
our mentors have been through instances like this. Apparently, it's cycles, right? And it was the cool thing to grow as fast as humanly possible, spend as much money as humanly possible, because as founders, we were more
woo-hoo.
confident that there was money out there. I hated when people told me that money's easy to go get. Go, oh, don't make it too easy. You have to add a little challenge to it. But cutting your business by 10% when it comes to employees, one, that's usually your biggest capital cost.
Yeah,
Um, that's something that you could easily, it's that word, trim the fat. And in the last podcast, as a startup, sometimes you have to trim beyond the fat. But these large companies, overexpanded. I feel like I'm watching the WeWork, documentary, in real
we
life,
crashed.
right?
Exactly.
And by the end of the day, they didn't really crash. They SPACed for $9 billion at appropriate valuation. But as I just mentioned, appropriate-er valuation. We were members of WeWork in the early days, and the fun that we had made it seem like it was worth
Member
$50 billion.
400.
But it's not actually. It's the hype that inflated everything. And so laying off
Yeah.
people seems to be relatively normal, but during these downturns, and this is where all the good business starts happening. This is where you start getting rid of the shitty cryptos. This is where you start seeing the founders and see what they're really made out of. But as a millennial entrepreneur, this is a really awesome, terrible, amazing learning experience these times.
It really is, and that's well said because I just watched the We Crash series, and you know what? I wasn't inside the company as a employee, but I was member 400, and so I went to the WeWork summer camps. I was there when it was kind of cool and fun because I used to hang out in coffee shops. I would go to all these different locations like Sunshine Suites. I never went to a green desk. My sister was a member of it,
Yeah.
and there was no place to congregate for all these tech people, and so. I still blame a lot of Masa. If you check out my tweets, someone wrote a really amazing article about he completely inflated our entire industry,
Everything.
and I can't place a singular blame on Masa, but SoftBank in 16, 17 came out with $100 billion. The largest tech firm at the time was maybe Andreessen, Sequoia, Insight with maybe a few billion AUM. And so, how do you compete with that? It's literally, we're here at a billion, which is still a phenomenal number. And then he comes in at 100x down. It's like, great. You know what? Your companies probably should be acquired. They probably should go public, but here's a lot of money. Stay private. Don't go public. And he bought in. So WeWork was then valued just randomly. I don't know exactly how it worked internally. Masa was like, great. You need like $1 billion. How about I give you 4.4 and
Yep.
I'll value you at 47 billion. And so
But then there
that
was the
sounds
opposite,
crazy.
right? Where he said, if you don't take it, I'm going to give it to your biggest competitor.
Exactly.
That's
And
what
so,
ruined everything, in my opinion.
right. And so, to my first point about the valuation, generally, if you see a company raise X at a Y or not at a Y, they don't tell you the valuation, assume it's 10%.
Yeah.
Generally, every round is 10 to 20%, especially those
In the
big
early
ranges,
days,
and especially at the early days. So he
definitely
wanted 4
20%.
billion and he wanted 40 billion valuation, easy 10%. But as Max was saying, this was in the articles that came out afterwards. He says, you rather me be on your side than against you. Because if you don't take my money, I'm just going to go fund your competitor. And it was like a strong arm. But look, that's business. He has his 100-year plan. There was an article, find my Twitter, and he explained just the kind of year over year of how this worked, his 100-year plan of how he wanted to build these startups. And what did VCs do? They had to kind of compete. SoftBank
Yeah.
came in, so they had to, one, compete for deals because they were throwing crazy valuations. And then you know what? They're getting markups. So if I invested $1 billion valuation, which is crazy, even in 2017, like all these unicorns, he come in and give like great 4 billion. You get a 4x on your markup, which at the late stage is still amazing, and that's still pre-IPO or next round. So you're still expecting it to double. And so from there, it just kind of keep growing, and no one wanted the good times to end. So what happened? Stocks were still going up. LPs, institutions, foundations, hedge funds started coming in because they saw these big numbers that actually
Yeah.
started to play into their world. Because we're still an alternative asset class. And while we are growing, maybe shrinking now, it was mostly VCs. And we always said, oh, all these transients are coming in and messing things up, which were a lot of the banks, a lot of the PE, a lot of the hedge funds who have completely different incentives. If a
Yeah.
PE hedge fund 2x's their money, that's amazing. If I 2x my money, I'm really bad at my job. When I invest, I want 10, 20x. This isn't 10 to 20%. If I give you $100,000, I'm expecting minimum $1 million back.
Yeah. No,
And
that
so
adds a
it's
lot of
just
pressure, as a founder.
it does. And so that's why I tell founders, I'm like, hey, I like you, but a lot of the times, most of my companies I invest in are pre-product pre-revenue. So I bet on a founder. And I just asked, do you know the game you're about to get into? Like, I know like you have this expertise, you want to start a company, but like, do you know my incentives? Do you know what the next round incentives are? Are you studying the market? I gotta keep spreading out. Do you know this game? Because you're here in a myopic world of, oh, I'm just going to run a company, but you got to think about everything else. And so that's usually a red flag
Yeah.
when looking at companies.
And it's about staying in control as a founder, and that's the first thing top VC or top angel investor says you need to do. But I mean, I know they probably think you need to be 100% in control, but from a founder's point of view, you could only control what you can control. And so you try and guide things in the rightest direction opposed to just implicating, because a lot of it's not even up to me. And so I turned on the TV and we were talking about all the layoffs, but apparently there's 400,000 jobs created this month. So maybe the economy is
Yeah,
doing a whole twist and turn. And just back to the WeWork movie, and even when we were members at WeWork,
yeah.
there was more
So
WeWorkers working in the community of WeWork than actual members. And I kept thinking, what are these employees even doing all day? It was
it's
it was
true. And
when we went to the summer camp, it wasn't a summer camp for the members, I'll promise you that, not to bash it. I had
yeah,
fun. But there was
yeah, we did.
500, 600 we workers there, employees, and there was only like 300, of us. And so we started
Yep.
seeing things were getting a little bit weird. But, they enabled Adam. They tried to portray him as this evil dictator type of dude, but he was just an ambitious freak. And that's the only way to really, be successful these days. And then when you pump money to one of these type of people, you almost feel like God. These are astronomical numbers that we're talking about. But it also encourages you to burn too
Billion.
quickly and not even look at the books and the numbers properly. And
It's
that's
hard to
what
be a
business is
founder,
all about. Yeah,
right? It's like, oh, you're getting press coverage. Ooh, this feels good. Oh, I have to hire people, or that deal didn't come through. And you have to time it in terms of your raise and how much money you're expecting and you're forecasting out. And to your point, so there are definitely a lot of layoffs in tech, a lot of these companies, and some of the sweethearts. So, like Carbon Health just laid off 8%, not a huge amount, but still 250 people. Policy Genius just laid off 25% in New York, 170 people. IRL is a startup, raised their Series C. They just laid off 25% or 25 people. So it's unfortunate. But
yeah,
as Max just mentioned, the jobs report came out today, and unemployment is still at 3.5%, which is still, you game the numbers with how many people, if you do the calculation, are still in their workforce and looking for work
yeah,
opposed to discouraged. But still, 325,000, I think it was, above estimates. And so this is kind of like the spinning of plates that our father always told us about of how to run a company. You see this guy spinning all these plates and like one's about to fall. So like revenue is still up. A lot of companies are doing well, at least in tech. Like Okta just crushed their numbers and their stock is up. Tesla says Elon Musk, the economy is a little shaky. Jamie Dimon, there's a hurricane. And so
Uh,
everyone's in like their little world. But the people at the top, they have their hands in a little bit of everything. And so, great. If I have a money manager, which I don't, I always watch the commercials and they're like, a sandstorm over in Europe disrupts the production and stops the shipping of this, which then leads to less imports and then consumer inflation. And so all these different pieces are going on at the same time, and we're just focused on our little world right here, which is great. Sometimes
yeah.
ignorance is bliss, but with all the news coming out and just instant satisfaction, we want to know. Great. I watch like Bloomberg, Kramer, and all like the money street every day, and I'm just trying to figure out and pick up pieces of kind of what's going on. Because as an investor, my job is to figure out where the puck is going to be, the Gretzky, in 9 to 12 months. If I invest in you now, where are you going to be in 12 months? Where's the market going to be? And where are investors going to be? That's the game I play.
Yeah.
And so everyone's trying to figure that out now. We're going into the summer, and COVID, no COVID, we're all still figuring it out.
Yeah, as a founder, we're just trying to get to tomorrow. As much as we have goals and a roadmap for a few months out, and trying to see where everything's going to be in a few months, we just have to keep trucking. And when it comes to cutting the fat and cutting and doing all these layoffs, there's also something I found to be incredibly important as well. Those layoffs need to come with also trimming customers. Those customers that are grandfathered into smaller margins, I have customers before COVID, we have contracts, and they'll pull up the contract when I try and raise prices. I call it force majeure. The world has changed, but they've been relatively good customers. But I've been trimming customers. I'm probably one of the only people that I just trimmed when the largest retailer said, I simply can't work with you guys anymore. The margins aren't there. It takes too much effort and time out of my business, and then it's always a negotiation, constantly. So also about trimming customers. If the margins are small, trim them. If they're
Yeah,
annoying,
I always ask
trim them.
founders, how much of a pain is it to work with this customer?
Yeah,
And so there are certain big customers that have massive expectations. We know who they are. And when you work with them, there are certain liabilities that come with it, especially in CPG. And if you're working with some of the biggest customers, they make sure that you have inventory in case they sell out. So not only do you have to take the risk of, oh my God, I signed one of the biggest customers, but you also then have to staff up just to support them. Be- because what we always say is land and expand. That's one of the ideas of this thing called negative churn, where if I get $1,000 contract with a customer, when I renew, I need to make that 1,500, 2,000, so that I'm actually growing my customers because they find value and then they want to expand it. And so you always try and find a proverbial leg in the door when you're working with a company, find a champion. They like it. They kind of start reverberating throughout the company. People are interested. It takes time. And so a lot of companies are showing that they can have negative churn, which wasn't really something until really tech came around, where you will get these enterprise contracts that basically say we're going to keep growing our internal metrics of customers, not only retaining them, but growing them. And it takes time. So when we invest from software to like hardware, we know that you can ship software and yes, it takes time to build it, but you can kind of just install that instantly. The hardware companies and CPG companies that we invest in, you have to go to the factory, you have to order it, it has to get shipped here, customs, warehousing, actually get on the shelves. The consumer buys it, takes it home, maybe then they'll review it. So
yeah,
depending on your company, your customers, your feedback cycle could be a day or months.
yeah. It goes back to that book, Freakonomics, right? You said something over there is affecting something over here. I never thought I would have to follow the oil market. At the moment, half my product's made out of polyester. I have compostable versions for the next iterations already ready, but it's just not the right time for something like that. And so the oil increasing in
Yeah,
price increases my price. And that's something I never thought. I order it and it comes, but my manufacturers have to negotiate with their suppliers, and
yep,
their suppliers have to supply them as well. And with this, the capitalistic society, they rather take something, the cotton from China comes from America to China back to America. So I don't even
It's
use cotton
cheaper.
because it's just simply not practical to do things like that. And so, there's the next trim. You trim the quality of your product. I refuse to do that personally. I work with elderly, I work with, very young toddlers and such. And so I have to make sure the quality of my product stays same. But I've bought things recently and I could tell the product and the quality has changed.
We call this shrinkflation.
Oof.
And it's cutting back. It's unfortunate. It's cutting corners. They either fire people, go find new suppliers. They just have to get product in market, and hopefully with some sustainable margin that is good for the business or sucks less to some extent. And so we're seeing this with some of our food, some
Yeah.
of our products that we're getting. Like when you open a bag of potato chips, it's what, at least 50% air. Maybe now it's 55%. Those chocolate bars with like the pyramids, whatever they're called, that you only buy in airports.
Yeah. The
Those always get
Toblerones.
smaller every single year. The Toblerones, those get smaller and smaller every year. And so the CPG side, definitely you can visually see it and taste it. You're not as full. And so these are just things that people have to do to survive. It
Yeah.
hasn't been something that we've had to do. And as Max and I were discussing before, we're now seeing this. And so the people that built us up, like the SoftBanks and the Tigers of the world, the ARCs, Tiger now, I think, as of the new headlines, is down 53% as a hedge fund.
The best in
But
the
like
world.
that's, well, you're the best in the world during the best of times. And so, great. They raised what, a $10 billion fund, a $15 billion fund. They were like the SoftBank, I guess they already had a 2.0, the 3.0, where they're investing at a ridiculous rate. If you go find their stats, they were doing like a deal every single day. And a lot of people, basically in the tech world, are saying they're basically creating an ETF, a mutual fund of every single stock they could at the growth stage for these tech companies, right? So you buy a basket of stocks, and it basically hopefully correlates a little bit less in terms of volatility. And so if I buy one tech company, it goes up or down, that's all of it. If I buy 100 tech companies and 10 or 20 go up or down, it's not as volatile. And so at least for them, it was
Diversifying, right?
working in exactly. Everyone always says diversify. But like, what does that actually mean? You have some cash, give it to a money manager, diversify. And so if someone can actually explain that, show it to you, be like, great, I'm going to put in some bonds, some stocks. I'm going to go into healthcare, into oil, into tech. The idea is that in good times, you go up steadily. In bad times, you don't go down as bad. But like ARK and Tiger, they are so correlated to tech companies. And so in the good times, it's like leveraged up. In the bad times, it's super leveraged down. And so not only are we seeing the hedge funds go down, which makes headlines because it's billions of dollars, they're
Yeah.
high flyers, but it also affects the tech world, which is what we talk about. So Tiger is still leading rounds. But as we're seeing now, these massive growth valuations are starting to come down a little bit. They're starting to get harder to come by. The multiples, people used to invest 100x. We're like, yeah, that's fine, no problem. Now they're like, well, the comps in the public markets are 10 to 30x revenue, and you need to be cash flow positive, net unit economics, all that stuff that we forgot about. So, how do these companies live up to their valuations? That's a problem that we haven't seen yet. Because if you joined
Yeah.
a company in the last 2 years of these high valuations, your RSUs or stock options, they're underwater. You almost have golden handcuffs. Not even golden, I would say rusty handcuffs at this point,
Yeah.
that you can't, one, afford your options, and two, the options are down underwater less than the value of what you can purchase them for. So it's becoming an issue, which we haven't even seen yet. So that's something that we're all kind of anticipating. How do companies deal with that? We've seen a lot of companies over issue more shares to compensate. So if you had 100 shares that are under, let's give you 300 shares so that we can make up for it, basically incentivize you to stay at the company because you're probably getting paid a decent salary at a more regular firm, less techy. Maybe you could be making more, but people join the tech companies because they're cool and they're fun, but also you have that upside, the equity at the IPO, what everyone bought into at WeWork. And it's really sad watching. It's like, oh my God, I am a millionaire on paper.
Oof.
And so you can't buy many things with it, especially in downtimes. At the high end, people probably would have bought you out. There are secondary markets, which we're starting to see take huge discounts, and it's going to be an issue. So I'm seeing all these bounces, but we're just starting to see the shoreline, the tide come out to really figure out what is sustainable.
What's under that? What's under that shoreline? This isn't a new phenomenon, right? There was Theranos, there was that Fast company, there was that squeezable juice bag when they realized one of the investors goes, I could just squeeze it myself. I don't have to have this hardware that cost $100 million to produce,
Juicero,
whatever it
RIP.
was. So there's always silly flops, even with the smartest people in the game. But they said it's about to be a crypto winter, but I'm going to throw it back the other way. Um, what does summertime mean for founders when it comes to talking to VCs? Are you guys at your Hamptons houses? Are you guys flying, to different countries? Do you have time of day for us? Are you as active? What is the vibe? Is this the best time to do it? Is this the worst time to invest? I feel like I'd be bothering you during the summer for some reason. Is it a crypto? Is it a VC winter during the summer? Ironically,
People are always raising, and look, every summer is different. We just went through the most active year possible in 2021 because everyone was home, everyone was Zooming,
mm-hmm.
everyone was doing digital meetings, and so taking summer off, like I work from home, it's amazing. I see my son every single day, and so I am still busy taking back-to-back meetings, whereas I can still take walks every day, and I'm not commuting into an office, which saves me some time. I'm very fortunate in that regard, but we're still investing. VCs still have capital calls of billions of dollars and raise committed funds. I think right now, just because of the market, things are definitely pulling back as people try and figure out what's going on. But if you have a good company, you have a good team, experience, a novel, doesn't have to be a unique idea, the best time to raise is when you think you need to raise, when you're capable of raising. So yes, the summers are probably a little bit slower right now, more so. But we just had three companies close out on a seed round, C plus, Series A, because they had metrics, they had a good team, they had years of proven track record,
Yep.
and the best part, their early investors backed them again. And so that's one of the big issues when you take money from these high flyers is you can't go back to them, you can't trust them. When you have a true lead investor who will come back. They'll support you. They'll throw in more money. That's actually what we're seeing a lot of right now, and what you should expect as a founder. That it is definitely harder, markets, timing, summer, all that, but lead investors and previous investors stepping up. And so, would you rather invest in a new risky company that doesn't know where the market's going, or would you put more money into one of your own companies that you know is doing well,
Double
give
down.
them the capital to get through all of this? And so there's two types of double downs. There's I invested, they raise another round in normal times, and I take my pro rata and I double down because they're growing
Can you
significantly.
explain that word real
Or,
quick? I apologize. I just remember it being such a big word when I was raising my capital, and it was something that every investor made sure had to be in a term sheet. That word pro
right,
rata. What does that
pro rata.
specifically mean? For the audience out there, this is an easy, basic thing that everyone needs to know. That's why I just want to emphasize it.
Yeah, so pro rata. I own 10% of your company. I invest 1 million, 9 million pre, 10 million post. I own 10% of your company. You go out and raise 10 million on a 90 pre at 100 million post. I get diluted. Now my shares are worth
Mm.
less, which is fine because I own less technically
Of a
of a
bigger
bigger
pie.
round.
Yep.
But I also want to invest more. And so my percentage of the company, the pro rata, I want to maintain that. So if I invested a million, I then put in more money. I have the right. That's what investors always want, either in the term sheet. Generally, it's a major investor right, or because at pre-seed and seed, almost everything is now safe notes. If it's not in there, which it generally isn't, we get what is called a side letter. It's like a side deal. Technically, you don't have to tell the other investors, but we're like, hey, we're investing. It's not in this legal document, but over here, a side letter, give me the right to invest more. Why? Because in hot times, if a company's doing well, you want to put as much money in as possible.
Yeah.
And so that's where you make your money. And then it's also a game of, well, if I put in money at the pre-seed and seed, I then am in the multiples game. And if I invest at the Series A and Series B, technically my multiple will go down because I'm valuing your company more. And so it will kind of game my numbers a little bit. But assuming everything works out and I put in a million, then I put in a 3 million, then 5 million, I have more money, more skin in the game. And so at a bigger exit, I have more money in. I will hopefully get more money out. And so this is just something that a lot of investors wanted. We'll see how many take them now. And right now, if you're not taking your pro rata the next stage, which I'm seeing some of them, we've done it as well. A lot of companies are then just going back, and the VCs are just pumping money into their better companies that normally in regular times, which we're not in, could go out and raise capital. And
As
so,
we,
look, we know
yeah, yeah,
we know who
as
our
we
good
get,
companies are.
yeah, as we hit the 30-minute mark, what advice do you have just right now for today? For today, I don't even want to say this advice is even real for tomorrow, but today, I know this will be launched, this podcast, in a few weeks, but what is your best advice today? It's
Right
hard, right?
now, you need to shore up your books. Well, no, it's one of those things. I was actually just tweeting that. It's an American phenomenon that when you ask a question, I'm supposed to say, that is a great question. People think it's somewhat reflexive, but also trying to buy time. So I'm sitting here thinking deeply before I answer, like, And so in that regard, shore up your books. Growth at all costs right now is over for 99% of founders. You're still going to see these series seed, like $8 million rounds. My
Yeah,
assumption is it's a serial entrepreneur, an exited founder, a top executive, and they command those. They're basically raising their pre seed and their seed at the same time.
yeah,
And as I was tweeting about, money cheats time, but it cannot buy you PMF, product market fit. Your goal right now is to stay alive, get customers, and prove that people need your product. Investors, they're pulling back, they're scared, and aren't as high flyer in terms of letting certain things be swept under the rug. Show us that you can get economics, show us that you can have margins, and really that you're the team to do this, that you know something and you have an unfair advantage. We've been talking about it for a while, but now people are actually expecting it, even at pre-seed and seed, which is really kind of somewhat a shot in the dark. And there's a huge difference in mentality between pre-seed and seed and Series A because we don't have much data to play on. So whatever limited data you have, make sure that it's good. Yep. So we lost you. It's okay. We're using tech platforms. So we'll just say with that, we're at the 32-minute mark. This is always fun. So as you can always find, I'm on Twitter. Max is on Twitter. Go to our website, email, DM me. I have an online investor list of 400 people. It's in my tweets. I posted it to LinkedIn. So do whatever you can. Reach out to people and make it personal. Don't spam. Don't BCC. This is a time to build relationships. Exactly. Keep it short. So with that, we're going to end it here. This is 3, and we're going to keep it going. So we'll see everybody